Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by Seedy Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local Seedy USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Like any sport, fly fishing goes through trends, largely driven by anglers' desire to catch more fish or improve a technique. And one of the biggest trends in fly fishing right now is what is known as Czech nymphing or Euro-nymphing. And we're fortunate today to have one of the world's leading experts on this tactic with us, Jason Lieverst. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. It's good to be here, man.
Well, excellent. You have traversed the globe as a competitive fly angler, and I'm sure you've got a good story or two teed up for us today.
I've got a few, yeah. I've been thinking about really a good story for you guys, and I think the best one would be to go way, 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 way back, as they say, to really when I first started competing. I guess as a boy of around, 14 years old. I'd already competed from a boat, floating around on reservoirs, and I got an invitation from a very large reservoir in the north of England to take part in a bank fishing competition, obviously fishing from the bank. So nervously I accepted it, and the reason I was nervous because there was, it's a very large reservoir. There were probably 150 guys out there in total. Some of these guys were, the big names in bank fishing competitions, and there's little old me at 14 years old in my first event. And we showed up on the day extremely nervous, and, I had no idea what I was doing. And, we all met at the lodge at the reservoir, and all these big names were toting their latest Sage rods. And, going back a long time in the UK, Sage was a huge thing to have. I didn't. I think the rod I was using was a Fenwick Iron Feather, if I remember rightly, which was a great rod. But anyway, we all met up, they did the draw, and I drew the worst peg, and everybody was giggling away, And the peg that I drew was right in front of the lodge, so obviously that was the place that got hammered the most throughout the normal fishing week. So everybody got situated, and I'm standing there on the bank thinking, what on earth am I going to do here? And they shot the shotgun up into the air, and I decided that I was going to tie on 3 flies. And I put a Type 3 sink line through the rings, and I pulled out the 3 streamers that I had in my box at the time, probably. I can't even remember what they were called, but I remember the colors. There was a white frizzy one, an orange frizzy one, and a chartreuse frizzy one. Let's call them frizzies.
Okay.
And they had a brass bead on them. We weren't using tungsten back in those days, obviously. So, I spaced them out about a meter, something like that apart, one on the point and a couple of tags. And I was like, well, hell, I'm here now. I may as well give it a go. So I threw out the line the best I could and, let it sink down a little bit. And, I guess I probably waited 25, 30 seconds and I started to retrieve it. And on probably the 5th or 6th pull, I felt contact. And I'm like, wow, I got a fish. Oh my God. So I lift up the rod tip and was nervous as can be and trying to get this fish in. Back in these days, it was killing the fish, and there was no glory in trying to net them and release them. It was all about putting them on the bank. So I figured I'd drag the fish in and start walking backwards. And the first step back that I did, I felt another bump on the line. I'm like, what's this? What's going on? So sure enough, there's 2 fish hooked up on that one rig. So I continued to keep the rod tip up and I'm walking backwards, shaking like a leaf, and then bang, something else hit the line. I'm like, really?
No way.
Yeah. So I walked these 3 fish out of the reservoir onto the bank and introduced them to Mr. Priest. And, in the first 5 minutes, I've caught 3 fish. So, I'm on now. I'm focused. It's like, my God, I'm amazing. I'm a superstar. And so I fished for another 7 hours. I never felt another bump. And I'm thinking, well, that was fun, So end of the day came, we all went up there, and I noticed that there was nobody walking up the bank with any dead fish in a bag. And turns out that by some unbelievable coincidence, those 3 fish that took that one setup were in fact the only 3 fish that had been caught that entire day.
No way. And you caught them on one cast on the same.
I caught them on the first cast. I caught 3 fish, and nobody had they didn't even feel a bump. There were something weird. Anyway, that's my introduction to competitive bank fishing. And I figured to myself, well, if it's that easy, I may as well carry on. Obviously, it certainly wasn't that easy, but there you go.
Yeah, that's like getting called up from the minor leagues and hitting a grand slam.
Yeah, man.
Hitting a cycle or something in your first game. That's amazing, man. Wow, I've never heard of anybody catching 3 fish. Lots of us have caught 2 on a dry dropper rig or whatever, or a double nymph rig, but not 3, and certainly not. Wow, that's a heck of an introduction into competitive fly angling.
Yeah, that was a good time. I got to say, it never happened again. So,
and now you've served as captain of 2 different national teams, right? England and Holland, correct?
Yeah, at very different levels. I captained an English youth team when I was, I guess, 16. And I captained the Dutch national team at the highest international level in the European Championships in 2014.
And now a brief message from our sponsors. Here at Seedy USA, we have owned nearly every brand of fly rod throughout our 30-year careers as guides and globe-trotting anglers. When we discovered Composite Development's flagship fly rods, the XL2 and the ICT2, we uncovered a secret harbored by the Kiwis for 4 decades. Born from Japanese Toray, Seedy's unique manufacturing process involves winding the graphite fibers inside the blank, negating heavy thread wraps at the end of each section, creating a lighter and more durable fly rod. Check out the XLS2 and the ICT2 at your local Seedy USA dealer or go to cd-fishing.us. And remember to go fishing.
So the world of competitive fly fishing, it's not like bass fishing. It's still pretty much under the radar, and a lot of folks have never witnessed it and don't really know how the whole system works. Can you describe the general outline of a fly fishing competition for us?
Yeah, sure. So there are, to my knowledge at this time, 38 federation members. Now, there's an organization called FIPS-MOOSH, which roughly translated into English is the International Sport Fly Fishing Federation. They're based out of Belgium, and they are essentially the governing body of, as I say, the highest caliber, if you will, of international sport fly fishing. So competitive fly fishing, essentially. So FIPS-MOOSH, at this moment in time, obviously COVID, let's say COVID hadn't happened, but they organize a World Fly Fishing Championships. They organize a European Fly Fishing Championships. They organize the Youth World Fly Fishing Championships. And as of very recently, and it's about time really, I guess, they are about to host the first female World Fly Fishing Championships in Norway, I believe it is, later this year. Alongside that, they also have a World Masters Fly Fishing Championships, which is for people over 50 years old. Yeah, as I say, there's 39 federation countries involved. That's, Europeans, Americans, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, pretty much anywhere you can think of, Mongolia included. And each individual federation country will have their own national fly fishing championships in order to select the best of their country to send them to the World Fly Fishing Championships to represent their respective countries.
Gotcha. So are you schooling up your wife to get in on this?
You know, we did discuss it, and funny you should mention that. The who's now the first vice president, but a guy called Paul Vakemans, who's a wonderful human being. He was the president for, I think, 2 terms, 8 years of FIPS-Motion. He actually sent me a message not too long ago, and he was like, "Is this something for Nicole?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, we've discussed it, but we have a lot going on, and 5 kids between us, and it's a gigantic commitment to make. I know, obviously, speaking from experience, it's it's an unpaid sport, and generally speaking, you got to pay for everything yourself for the most part. So yeah, we kind of passed up on that one."
Gotcha. It sounds like it's right up my alley. I specialize in unpaid activities.
Well, we work in fly fishing, right? So
yeah, and your wife is Nicole Darland, whom I met years ago through the television, the outdoor television industry. She was the host of a show that I produced, and we had a lot of fun. Traveled to a lot of cool places and had a great time. And it was awesome because, last year she reached out to me and said that you guys were coming into the area, and we had a chance to go get out on the river. We went down to the Missouri and did a float, and you kind of showed me what's up with the Czech nymphing thing. My first introduction, the first time I guess I saw it was at a competition here called the Fly Fishing Masters that the production company that I used to work for put on. And that wasn't the type of competition that you're accustomed to. It was just kind of a no holds barred. You could fish, the guys were fishing dry flies, and they were mostly just guides from the Rocky Mountains or some guys from Pennsylvania. But Lance Egan was there, and he was in the competition. And so, I was watching him fish and thinking to myself, this doesn't look that much different than the high stick nymphing that I grew up doing. Can you kind of describe for me what defines Euro-nymphing or Czech nymphing, which, by the way, I understand was invented in Poland?
Correct. Just to throw a curveball at everybody there. So yeah, I'm probably going to get lynched by various Czech people that I know, but it was, in fact, I guess if you could say invented, it was invented in Poland. So, for my Polish friends, yes, it is Polish nymphing. But back in those days, it was a regular 9'5" weight rod, and they would have probably 12 inches of fly line out the top guide, which would essentially be used as the indicator. So what they'd do, they'd make these extremely heavy lead-bodied bugs and cover them up in dressing, obviously, and they'd short lob them upstream, and they'd just track it back, watching the top 12 inches of fly line dangling out the top eye, and that would be their indicator, as I say. So if that twitched or stopped or moved weirdly, they'd set the hook, and they rapidly discovered that was a really cool and effective way of pulling out a pile of fish in the shortest space of time possible. And I think we're probably going back to like the mid to late 80s. The Poles won a world championships doing that technique. I believe the Czechs came second that year, and they obviously watched what they were doing, so they kind of took that technique and ran with it, and lo and behold, Czech nymphing was born. And the Czechs were, and still are for all intents and purpose, an incredibly successful team at world championship level. They've won a lot, but kind of after that point, Czech nymphing, Polish nymphing, whatever you want to call it, of course, many other teams started to see that this was an effective way of not only winning competitions, but, getting as many fish out of a beat as humanly possible in a 3-hour period, which is the timeline given to you for each session that you fish at championship level. So they all started to put their own nuances into it. The French started to mess around with longer rods and super long leaders and tiny weighted flies. tungsten beads came along, smaller hooks and jig hooks came along, and then the Spaniards got involved, and they're essentially the team to beat the French and the Spaniards these days. So really, the Italians had their own put on it, even the English, and now the Americans. I mean, so I guess the term Czech nymphing, Polish nymphing is kind of obsolete for all intents and purpose. And the European nymphing phenomenon, as it now is really a combination of all the major 5 countries that have been successful at international level. So, Poland, France, Italy, Spain, and of course our Czech friends. So it's kind of a gumbo of European techniques, hence its name, European nymphing, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the technique itself, there's no indicators being used for what we may know as an indicator, a bobber or something of that nature. We're not allowed to use split shot at competition level. So all this technique has been built around the fundamental rules of international sport fly fishing, so no bobbers, no indicators, no split shot. So the weight is built into the fly by way of a tungsten bead. And really the only indicator, if you want to call it that we have is generally what we refer to as a sighter, which is, for all intents and purpose, let's say 1.5 feet, 2 feet of fluorescent mono that's tied into the leader system just before you tie on your tippet and your flies. And that's suspended above the water surface to make sure you can see it and it moves freely, and essentially going back to the same principles as the Czech stroke Polish or Polish stroke Czech nymphing of old. That's your indicator system. Well, certainly one of them. And that's kind of where we are. And I'll say that, as recently as probably 8-9 years ago, this whole technique was, in the general traditional fly fishing sense, widely known as the devil's work. That's got nothing to do with fly fishing. Oh my God, you can't do that. And, we're happy that over the last period of time, it's become widely acceptable. Manufacturers are putting their own take on European nymphing tackle, so rods, reels, fly lines, da-dee-da-dee-da. And I'll say in this country, that's really, in part, certainly a very large part, down to the success of Team USA Youth at the international level. I was fortunate enough to know, and I still know, many of the, as we refer to them, the world-class wrecking crew of kids from around the US that went out to Europe and just absolutely dominated. They won, I believe, 3 gold medals as team back-to-back. That team was phenomenal. And it's come back to the US. These kids did so well. And obviously, Team USA adults, they started to achieve success at the international level. Gold they haven't yet achieved, but they've had silver and bronze. And, it's become a thing. It's awesome. People are, we work in that part of the industry, well, Nicole and I, and we've noticed that, the regular Joe, if you will, who 8-9 years ago would be probably one of those guys, you can't have, that's not fly fishing, but now they're doing it because they've realized that it is a really, really cool way to catch a lot of fish in, perhaps water types that they would usually walk past with a bobber and a dry fly because it's too quick. So yeah, it's become a thing, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's funny. In fact, yesterday, a friend of mine sent me a reel, and in the box was a few of these bumper stickers, which I'm sure you've seen, that say, "I don't agree with Euro-nymphing." And it's so classic that he sent these to me yesterday. I was like, oh, awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
perfect
talking
timing
with Jason tomorrow.
Yeah.
But this is funny because this just kind of harkens back to, John Gehrig famously wrote, there's only 2 types of people on the river, right? Us and the assholes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's the fly fishing nature to criticize what the other folks are up to. But I think it's funny that there is an aversion. Apparently there's an aversion to Euro-nymphing so much so that bumper stickers are being made.
Man, it's fly fishing.
Yep. There's some guys that only swing flies for steelhead. There's some guys that only fish dry flies for steelhead, for instance. And if you're doing anything else, then you're kind of below them.
Yeah, it's the wonderful elitist sport that we're all involved in. But I'll
Right.
tell you, man, I started fishing for one reason and one reason alone. That's to catch fish. If I see a cougar or a bear or an eagle, that's awesome. That's just a bonus to being outdoors. But fundamentally, I think, my personal opinion, I go out fishing to catch fish. And if I can catch a bunch, large, small, medium, different species, I've had a great day. And, I don't have to come home and say, if somebody says, how was your day fishing? I was, oh, it's great. I saw an eagle, which basically means you got skunked.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I'll fish a dry. I'll fish a dry dropper. I'll fish a streamer. But, if I have to. And that's really the whole point of it. For me personally,
Well, if you fish a lot, like a lot of us do, you become much less picky as towards the tactic. Because if I'm a dry fly angler, I'm going to have a lot of days in the wintertime learning to dry fly.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah. So it's just another tool to have in your bag. And it's,
Basically.
and for sure right now, it's a popular tactic. The fly fishing industry, as it does, is keeping up with it and developing, some specified equipment. And you yourself and Nicole have a company called Nymph Master. Can you tell me about Nymph Master?
Yeah, that's one of the, at the moment, 3 companies that we have. Nymphmaster is the fly tying materials and hook business, which we launched actually on Nicole's birthday, November the 1st, 2018. Who needs another fly fishing online store, right? That they're popping up like every
I've got
day.
one.
Particularly, there you go, right? I mean, it's great. It puts out more stuff, but I've had several over the years in various different countries, I guess. And when we launched nymphmaster.com, we kind of decided that we didn't want to be just another online store. And I'm sure a lot of people say that, but so we decided to source products that were not available in North America. And the stuff that we couldn't source, we tapped into our years and years and years of experience of making our own stuff. I mean, I was a commercial fly tyer for a long time, and the beads that were around at the time were crap. So I found a guy in Germany who would make them for me, because essentially tungsten beads are all made in the same 2 factories in China, 3 miles apart. And then people put a different label on them, and
Sure.
Lo and behold, a company is born, so to speak.
Right.
But we didn't want to do that. So, we sourced our own materials for our very exclusive range of dubbing, for example, and the materials that we use to manufacture that, all American materials, nothing's imported. The natural dubbings that we make, the pelts that we get actually come from the fashion industry. So there's no, naphthalene sprayed all over them to protect them. You can't imagine a model walking down the catwalk smelling like mothballs. So, that's also funny. We can laugh about that, but it's a carcinogenic product. That wonderful smell that we all know and love when we're tying flies, where we pull out a squirrel pelt, it's not good for you. So we, everything that we make is clean, everything is American sourced, and it's unique to us. And we have our own range of barbless hooks. Again, hook companies are popping up left, right, and center all over the world. And let's be honest, how many hook manufacturers are there in the world? Unfortunately, barbless hooks, good luck trying to find a source for those in the United States. If there was one, we'd be using them. There's Japan, there's South Korea, there's China. We don't deal with Chinese companies, but Anybody can call these companies and say, I want to buy your barbless hooks out of your catalog, and they do, and they'll put a label on it, and Bob's Barbless Hooks is born. But we didn't want to do that either. I mean, I have a relationship with these hook manufacturers for decades, so again, we went through the process. Hey, can we send you our own designs? Can we, perhaps use an already existing design but make it a better wire, stronger, more carbon content, etc., etc. So we did that, and our hook range has taken off like a rocket. People are buying them all over the world, and they love them. So that's great, and we have Textreme fly tie materials, which is a wonderful Italian company. Really beautifully made materials, synthetics, no natural stuff with those guys. And yeah, I mean, it's gone really, really well. We have a lot of customers all over the globe, and that's that business. We also have Master Nymph. We manufacture right here in Washington State, specifically designed from the ground up European nymphing style rods, if you will. And many people have already hailed them over the last 4 years as, the best European nymphing rod on the planet. That's great. We're happy that people are realizing that, and that's what we set out to do. That company's moving forward at light speed right now. It never actually had a website for various reasons. The website is now built, so we will be launching a brand new range of these rods in the very near future. In fact, we'll be launching 2 ranges. So keep an eye open for that website launch. And the third business we have is Master Nymph Academy, which was born again out of necessity, because we got a lot of people calling us who were getting into Euro style nymphing, saying, hey, you've been doing this a long time. Can you show me what to do? And we're like, yeah, sure. Let's go fish. Obviously, living in Bellevue, we have a lot of tech companies in the area. A lot of people fish. They don't have a lot of time. They do have liquid cash to go out and catch as many fish as they can in the limited time that they have. So Master Nymph Academy is basically a business that will teach European style fishing, European style nymphing to people. And we actually launched it last year, and we got a property out in Idaho on the Coeur d'Alene River, did several clinics out there, and it kind of blew up so quickly that we decided to buy a couple of properties along what I personally think is the best river on the planet out of the 30 however many countries I've fished in the world, which is Rock Creek in Montana. For our technique, if you want to call it that, Rock Creek is wonderful. I mean, that entire river system is just designed for our type of fishing. So, the back end of last year, we bought a couple of properties along there, which we will be using for the Master Nymph Academy.
Gotcha. Cool. Got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, you got to have, right?
So, yeah, no doubt. When we were on the Missouri last year, I believe you were fishing with a 10-foot 3-weight. Is that right?
10.5-foot 3-weight, yeah.
Now, why is that tool so perfectly suited to your technique?
I mean, it's a 10.5-foot rod to start with, so obviously that will give you more reach. You can relay this to a high sticking technique, which is obviously very well known in the States already. So that will give you more reach, more lift, more control over the fish once you've hooked them. Certainly if you're dragging them in from the other side of the river. The weight system is funny. You should bring that up. That's something that we've struggled with European nymphing rods, quite simply because a 2-weight is not a 2-weight.
Right.
A 3-weight is not a 3-weight. It can't be, for the simple reason you're not throwing a fly line. For the most part, you can throw a fly line, but you'll find that if you grab a 10-foot 2-weight Euro style rod, it's highly likely that the butt section will probably be a 3 or a 4-weight. The tip section may be a 1-weight or a 2-weight. And what's in between is not a 2-weight either. So And there's a reason for that, right? You need the power in the butt section to subdue and control the fish, and also to, lob. It's not really a cast that we do, to be completely honest. It's more of a lob. Heavy flies, you need that accuracy, which comes from the power of the butt section and maybe the second section too. But then, of course, you need the lighter top two sections in order to help you fish the light tippet that we do. And in many cases, we will fish with 7 and 8x tippet almost as standard, and still subdue and land fish, large fish in really quick time. So we are going to change that system when we do actually relaunch Master Nymph, the new range, the new website. We're also making specifically built European nymphing fly lines right up in Colorado with our partners Monic. They'll be launched very soon. Various other things coming down the pipe, but it's a system that doesn't relate to this type of rod, because we are not throwing fly line, we are throwing mono. So how can it be a 2 or a 3, whatever rod? It can't. There's no connection. So essentially we're going to rebrand that rating system for Euro style rods, which may or may not, hint hint, be more akin to a spinning rod system. Power as opposed to AFTMA rating, because it just doesn't make any sense. But what do you do? It's the system that's in place. It's a system that's been in place for a very, very long time. And here we are, a husband and wife company that will, and that came from our customers more than anything. They're like, dude, this is not a 2-weight rod. I'm like, I know. But what do you want us to do? Say, put a decal on the side, say, this is not a 2-weight rod, just as a disclaimer. It isn't, but that's the system that's in place. So we are going to change that. And we're going to confuse a lot of people. That's awesome. We're going to get a lot of.
You are. It's like the what's taking place right now with the switch game, for instance. Spay casting is super confusing now. The fly fishing industry has done an champion's job of confusing everybody to the point where you need to call, or most anglers need an expert, a buddy, someone they can call that really knows it in and out, because a 440 grain head may be what you want, or a 420 grain head might be what you want on that switch rod. But everyone is so ingrained, like, well, what do I need? A weight forward 6? No, you need a 420 grain Scandi. What the hell is that?
It's like everything else in fly fishing, man. A trout spay.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's what is that? And then you have to go out and study what it is, and okay, there's a use for it, but everybody's trying to innovate, and that's great for our sport. The more innovation, the better for all of us. And I'll tell you this though, man. A lot of the innovation that you find in fly fishing, in, shall we say, more traditional fly fishing, does come from competitive fly fishing, because of course I've always said, competition breeds innovation.
Sure.
And it does in any sport. And, I apologize before we actually get stuck into renaming the rating system for Euro rods. I apologize now, because it is going to confuse people, but we will try and explain it the best we can. So yeah, long-winded way of answering your question, I guess.
Awesome. Well, could you give me some insight into the seedy underbelly of competitive fly fishing? There's gotta be come on, man. Do the Americans really cheat like they say they do?
Oh boy, you're trying to get me lynched. I'll say this: I worked for the International Sport Fly Fishing Federation, FIPSMOOSH, for a long time, and my role in that organization was they called me the Chief of International Supervision. So I had to arrange a team of volunteers from around the globe who would give up their time and their money to travel the world and essentially monitor the home team during the competition. And that was because, cheating happened. Of course it did. And we built this sidearm of the federation in order to monitor the home controllers and the home competitors. And the reason for that was, of course, there would be a team, an army of volunteers to score people's fish. Now, if you're the home nation, you're going to end up with a home nation controller. Yeah, shit. Right. People are going to cheat, and they did. So we put this team in place, and it was awesome. We essentially ruled out any possible cheating on the part of the home team. But then you'll get competitions out in Bosnia, for example, and you've got Bosnian controllers saying to, I don't know, a competitor from an unnamed country, saying, "Hey, buddy, if you give me $50, I'll put like 10 extra fish on your scorecard." And yeah, people did that, and they still do. I resigned from that position because I was very serious about my role there, and I was away from my family like 3-4 times a year for 2 weeks just to monitor and find cheats. I was like the cheat Gestapo, and and when I find them, and I did, and then I report what not only me but my team's findings were, nothing was done about it. And the reason for that I understand, because it's a voluntary sport, and if you castrate some guy from Bosnia who you caught red-handed cheating, the Bosnians ain't coming back next year because they'll be so embarrassed, and they'll be like, "F you, we're not doing this. We didn't cheat." Because of course, when you get caught cheating, the first thing you do is deny it, and you'll stand your ground till your death, saying, "I didn't do it." So what will happen? Teams will fall off, and it will become a less attended sport, right? And I get that, but it's so frustrating. I mean, I have considered in the past writing a book about the stuff that I experienced as a representative of the organization, as opposed to a competitor myself. And I might do that one day, and I'll probably get shot. But
I'd wait till you're out of the industry, but I'll read it.
I'll probably launch it like a week after I've passed away or something, and a bunch of disclaimers. But yeah, I mean, it does happen, and unfortunately, it happens at every single event. I mean,
wow.
I would love to sit here and
I would love to hear it. Yeah, I want to hear about it on the river this summer.
We'll do. That's probably the best way to do it. I mean, maybe that's another podcast for another day or something. The cheat reveal by name.
Yeah, that's awesome. I assumed that was the case, as it is in any sport. Well, great. So you'll be out in this neck of the woods more henceforth. Oh, yeah. So that's awesome. When you're on, for instance, a place like Rock Creek, and Rock Creek gets a lot of angling pressure, and you watch anglers go through a spot, and then you just go in behind them and mop the place up. Do a lot of folks then come approach you on the river, or obviously they watch? But is it unusual for them to come up and start chatting with you and figure out what you're up to?
Not these days. I mean, back in the day, I've been spat at. I've had my car scratched. I've had all kinds of. In fact, I've had a turd smeared all over my back window. I mean, I'm not even kidding. But these days. True story. Oh my God!
When that happened, did you get rid of your Euro-nymphing customized license plate? Did you get rid of your vanity plate?
Yes. I took the rod vault off the car immediately. Right. I mean, I am not a rod vault nympher. No. No. I mean, example, like last summer, we were out with a young lady who we worked with from North Carolina, Ali. Absolutely wonderful kid and an incredibly talented angler. She's got this long flowing blonde hair, she's tiny, and, she is a super fishy girl. And obviously Nicole, is dead fishy as well. And we as I said, we got this property in Idaho up in Pinehurst, and we started to investigate the area and try and figure out, good pieces of water for us to do this, right? Because the Coeur d'Alene is a monster river, so it's not like you're going to be wet wading or even walk wading most of that river, because you will go for a swim. It's so deep and big. So we spent some time finding good places, and Ali and I found a place on one day. Nicole was actually driving in the following day, and we found this place, and we absolutely annihilated that piece of water, and it was a really good day. I don't know, we fished it for maybe 3 hours, and we both caught, whatever, 60, 70, 80 fish. I don't even know. Beautiful cutthroat trout everywhere, right? Typical Coeur d'Alene. So, of course, Nicole shows up the next day. We're like, let's go back. Let's show Nicole what we found. And we went up there, and there's a guy standing there on this bank, and he's lobbing a bobber and, 9'5" weight. And I mean, there were fish trying to eat his bobber, and we did the right thing. We just sat on a log and watched him for about 15 minutes before we sort of passed him and said, hey, can we go down? Or I think it was upstream from you. But the guy was missing fish after fish after fish, and eventually we walked down to him. I mean, clearly the guy could fish. He had a beautiful cast, and, he knew his stuff, but he was just struggling to get one on the bank. So we walked past him, and I was like, hey, do you mind if we just move down from you there? And he's like, sure, but give me some space, And I was like, yeah, man. And we ended up about 100 yards, whatever, upstream from him. And of course, Ali and I are Euro-nymphing, and it's just every cast, pow, 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 and 2 at a time. And Nicole, to add insult to injury, is throwing dry flies and absolutely mopping up. And Nicole, being the wonderful person that she is, she came over to me. She's like, I'm going to go talk to that guy. And I'm like, I don't know, babe. This, we're in the middle of nowhere. She's like, no, I'm going to go and say hi and give him my dry fly. I'm like, sure. So, of course, we carry on fishing. Nicole's up there talking to the guy. Long story short, he comes down, and he actually owns the cabins right in front of where we're fishing. And turns out to be a really nice guy. And he's like, yeah, what are you guys doing? And, we ended up showing him a few things, and he essentially became a customer right on the bank there and then. And that happens these days. But it never used to. We still get, dare I say, a dry fly purist, particularly on Rock Creek, right? Because there's a lot of dry fly fishermen there. And it's a world-renowned dry fly river, and it's awesome. But, we'll get the odd guy like, kind of snarling at us, and he'll walk off in his thigh waders with his pipe and his handmade custom micro landing net, and that's perfectly fine. But I will fish dries too, and I won't ever criticize a man who just wants to fish dry flies or streamers or eggs or whatever. It's about catching fish. But yeah, a lot of people will come over and say, well, shit, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, and the way that you handle yourself on the river, where you will go up and you ask somebody, that is the key. Etiquette is a hell of a lot more important than the method of fishing that you prefer.
For sure.
So I would prefer that everybody focused on their etiquette and take note of whatever somebody else is doing and fish in a manner that doesn't inhibit what they're up to.
Right. And, if that includes not smearing turds on somebody's back window,
yeah, right.
That would be great too. No, I agree with you, man. Etiquette's important.
For sure. Well, hey, it was really good catching up, and I'm looking forward to seeing you more often out here. I'm stoked that you've taken up hunting. We're going to have to go out and conduct that activity together a little bit as well.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I can't wait.
Yep, me too, man. Well, hey, thanks again, Jason. Really appreciate your time today, man, and we will catch up soon. Say hi to Nicole. Give her our best.
For sure, brother. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.